Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Psychedelic Scene podcast. I'm your host, Jill Sitnick. Think of me as your psychedelic big sister. And today I am chatting with someone I've met in real life. Jonathan Robinson is someone who is incredibly experienced in MDMA therapy and introduced me to the idea of MDMA therapy via Zoom, which, frankly, when I first heard of that, I thought was really, really weird. And turns out it's a beautiful strategy for hundreds and hundreds of couples. So get ready to learn a little bit more about this healing modality as Jonathan and I have this lovely conversation. Let's get started. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Psychedelic Scene podcast. Today, I am super excited. This is someone I've met in person. We have Jonathan Robinson on the podcast. Jonathan, hello.
Hello, I'm excited too.
It's kind of interesting how things all intersect. So who ever thought one day when Jonathan walked up to me at PsyCon that at some point we'd be on the same podcast. So I'm excited, everybody. Let me read to you Jonathan's bio so that you know who we are chatting with. Jonathan is a former psychotherapist and the author of 16 books. 16. He's got me beat. His most recent books are Ecstasy as Medicine and Ecstasy for Couples. He has trained over 500 clinicians in how to do MDMA-assisted therapy. And Jonathan has made numerous appearances on Oprah, CNN, and other national television shows. His mission is to make MDMA therapy accessible, affordable, and highly effective for the masses by training healers in ways they can facilitate this type of therapy legally. And just so everybody knows, I have taken Jonathan's class. I, of course, have gone through MDMA therapy myself. So we're going to work really hard to not completely get into the weeds and keep things clear for folks who might be new to this. And so with that in mind, Jonathan, what's your origin story? Introduce yourself to our audience. How the heck do you find yourself talking on the Psychedelic Scene podcast?
Sure. Well, I was fortunate to grow up in your average or not so average dysfunctional household. So by the time I was about 14, I was trying meditation and drugs. And I think I took MDMA first when I was about 16. And that was the first time I really understood intimacy and communication and empathy and all those things that make relationships work. So when I went to graduate school, I actually did the first master's thesis on MDMA for overcoming traumatic memories in 1984, and then they made it illegal in 1985, and have really led about 600 or 700 people on what I call MDMA therapy ever since. And then, of course, you took my training where I teach other people, both clinicians and people without degrees, how to do this type of therapy.
Well, so I wasn't expecting you to end so quickly because I know you have so much to your background.
Well, let me go more. Sure,
Well,
let me go more into that. Obviously, because MDMA is still a scheduled drug, I've had to do this underground.
yeah.
But I found a way to do it where there was really no legal risk to me or the people doing it, in that I kind of spearheaded a protocol where we do this over Zoom.
Okay,
And
well, so hold on one second. Hold on. Look, we already got weedy. Hold on. Let's explain to folks who are new to this, what exactly do you mean by MDMA-assisted psychotherapy or therapy? Just kind of give us the bird's eye view, the level 100.
Sure. Well, as you know, MDMA is really good for helping people with a lot of conditions, whether it be trauma or anxiety. It's really good for couples relationships. That's what it originally was back in the 1970s. And so, as a former psychotherapist, I started using it with clients. I realized I could do 2 years of therapy in one afternoon with this medicine. So I started to do it with a lot of my clients that wanted to do it. and the results were great. So that's what I've been doing, 600, 700 sessions in the last 40 years. But what it basically is that I usually meet for somebody for an hour and talk to them about what their problem is or what they're looking to achieve. That's not on MDMA. And then we set aside a 5 hour time to do the therapy. It's 5 hours where they take the medicine and we go into, as you would say, the weeds of what the situation is and how they can overcome their trauma or their anxiety or their couples issues. And then about a week later, I do an integration session where they're not on the medicine and give them a plan for moving forward. And that type of scenario often leads to results that really can't even be achieved sometimes in a couple of years of ongoing weekly therapy. So it's faster, it ends up being cheaper, and it's a lot more fun than going to a therapist week after week, I think.
In your opinion, scientific or your opinion, what is it about MDMA that allows for the release? And I mean, I can answer it from my personal experience, but like from your perspective, what is it that allows it?
I think there's a few things. One thing, of course, is that it reduces blood flow to what's called the amygdala, and this is the part of the brain that kind of leads to fear and anxiety. And so when you take MDMA, the effect is that you're fearless in a certain way. You're not having that mental chatter, and there's a kind of a clear-headedness that lets you focus on issues without anxiety, without fear. And it's almost like a truth serum that way as well. A lot of people who have all kinds of defenses, the defenses go down, and without their ego and their fear in the way, they can solve problems in a matter of minutes or hours that might have taken years to achieve in other ways.
It's almost like for me, the MDMA opened the door that my fear kept closed when I obviously wasn't on any sort of medicine. And opening that door then suddenly allowed me to explore in a very safe way and talk about things that there's no way my body would just flipped out if I was actually talking about those things without the medicine. So I think that's a really good explanation. So I can imagine, because I was one of them, I was a skeptic. I was like, this guy, COVID, I'm reading your book. I'm going, what? How the heck? Because I had like the Cadillac of MDMA therapy. I had two practitioners right there with
Uh,
me. And I'm like, what is he talking about? How can this work over Zoom or whatever? And so give us some insight. How did you come to that decision to do that, to try it? And what's your insight about that particular way of working?
yeah, it's a great question. Well, I had been doing it in my office, of course, and then when COVID hit, that wasn't possible. So I thought I'd give it a shot. I was skeptical myself, and I found with the first three clients I did that the results weren't just good, they were actually better than when I did it in person. And that almost made no sense to me. Like, wow, who would have expected that?
Right.
I had to kind of reverse engineer why that might be happening. For example, I deal with a lot of women who've been sexually abused. Having them come to my office, take a drug with a relative stranger was not a very safe feeling for them.
Sure.
And but on Zoom with MDMA, there's no higher level of safety than being on Zoom on MDMA. And I find that safety is a real good prerequisite for how deep you can go in therapy.
Yes.
So I started to do this. I talked to Rick Doblin of MAPS about it.
Mhm.
He was surprised, like, you're kidding me. Like, this works over Zoom? And I said, well, it works. It not only works over Zoom, I think it works a lot better over Zoom. But there's different styles of doing this. The MAPS approach, which probably a lot of your listeners know about, is basically take a pill with a blindfold and music and see if that helps. Well, studies show that it does, but I don't think that is the best way to do it. The reason why the studies were done that way was they were hoping that it would get FDA approval because it's called the Food and Drug Administration. It's not called the Food, Drug, and Therapy Administration. So, in fact, it did not get approved to
Right.
many people's surprise
Yes.
because the FDA basically said we don't know how to evaluate this because
Therapy.
there's
Yeah.
there's a therapist there.
Hmm.
But I think over time, and maybe even in the next year, the possibility is that it will be approved. Robert Kennedy Jr. is actually a proponent of psychedelics and MDMA, so we'll see if that happens. But it's so much more effective than the next best treatments for things like PTSD that they could save a lot of money. The Veterans Affairs is really pushing for it because they could
Yeah.
save a lot of money by doing this type of therapy. And doing it over Zoom uh, ends up, you can do it for 1/10 the cost of doing it in a clinic. That's pretty good. It's a
Hmm.
lot more convenient for everybody because, nobody has to drive or take a plane.
Hmm.
And it's also legally a lot safer than having somebody do it in your office. So there's a lot of reasons why I started that protocol. I saw that work better and taught it in my training.
Well, I've got a couple of comments. I think the first one is what I was surprised about. Like, I know everybody, my phrase is that no matter what medicine you're working with, the very first time you're working with that medicine, you have to kind of meet the medicine. You have to learn how it is, get safe with it, things of that sort. I think that's a universal thing. Um, Having people in their own home with their own stuff, their own blankets, their own robe, their own tea, I mean,
Their own pets
their
also.
own pets, a loved one 10 minutes away or somewhere else in the house. Like there's in my opinion, this is all my opinion, there's kind of an easier ramp onto feeling safe with the medicine because you just feel safer overall.
Yeah.
And then let's talk a little bit about because I agree with you. Research is done a certain way to make sure that it can be as uniform as possible. My therapy, I had the eye mask. I was chit chatty. I was interacting with my practitioners. I would easily say 75% of the time. And this would really help me. So can you share a little bit what you have found? Obviously, if you're on Zoom, you're chit chatting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I do let people know that if they want to listen to music and use a blindfold, that they can.
Yeah.
So the say 650 sessions I've done, exactly 3 people have asked for that. So 1 out of 200. People love exploring on MDMA if they can, if somebody's there who is asking them good questions and such. So the MAPS thing where you're mostly listening to music, in your case, chatting away. But for most people, it's just listening to music with an eye mask. And I don't think that gets the full therapeutic value that is possible.
I agree. I agree. Do you find that on MDMA, I mean, I was actually very responsive to the questions I was getting, and I chose not to lie. Like, if I didn't want to say something, I didn't say something. Like, completely had my agency, and the chit chatting was I was dealing with two very competent, safe adults, which my inner children did not have. And so I thought it was awesome. How the people that you're working with, how do they feel when they're, working with you?
Well, a lot of people report that it's like the best, deepest therapy session of their life, and they feel completely comfortable. It's a very intimate experience, as you know, and the combination of the MDMA, my questions, and the Zoom, where there's more safety, it's it's riveting. And I liken it a little bit to brain surgery. because you can really go deep and almost like rewire people's belief systems, and they see things so clearly. And MDMA is very different than the other so-called psychedelics. It's nothing like psilocybin or LSD,
Right.
where you're potentially have a bad trip. 650 sessions, exactly zero people have had a bad trip. Whereas with LSD, you get maybe 20% of people having a bad trip.
Yeah.
That's why I would never do those medicines over Zoom.
Mhm.
Um, I like to share a story, which I'm sure you've heard, Jill, of when my parents took MDMA to give a sense of how it can operate. My parents always were worried that I was, working with this illegal drug. And I said, they asked me what it's like. And I said, well, really, the only way you can know is by taking it. My parents were pretty conservative, but they said, well, okay, we'd like to try it. And I was surprised, but I gave them the medicine, told them how to take it, right set and setting. A year later, I asked them, did you ever take the MDMA? And they said that, yeah, we took it. And I said, what happened? And they said, nothing happened. It didn't take effect. We waited like 15 minutes and we didn't feel anything. Well, as you know, Jill, it usually takes about 45 minutes for the drug to kick in.
Yep.
So I was curious what happened after they thought it didn't work. And they said, well, we had nothing planned that night. So we decided to sit on the couch, and then their eyes lit up and they said, it ended up we had the best night of our entire marriage. We talked about how much we loved each other, how grateful we were. We had had some arguments the previous week of some issues that had been going on decades, and we solved them in 20 minutes. It was really a wonderful conversation. And then we cuddled on the couch. I'm laughing the whole time, of
Yeah.
course,
Because
because
of
this
course,
is
medicine didn't do anything.
yeah, right, right. And that's one of the things I like about it is it makes you like at your very best, both for solving problems, for connecting, and it doesn't feel so much like a weird drug. It
Right.
just feels like the way I describe it is when I took it, I felt like this is how life should be, and the rest of my life I've been on a bad drug.
Yeah, I've experienced MDMA therapeutically, and I've also experienced MDMA in a bonding dose, like a much lower dose, and just for bonding. And the comment from my partner back to me was, "Well, what was supposed to happen?" And I said, "Well, just there is no defined thing of what's supposed to happen. What did happen for you, and the lack of fear, the anxiety, the just being able to be much more present." Uh, it was just one of the lovely, we didn't have any like overarching issues to kind of work through or anything of that, and we were very purposeful with what we were doing, and it wound up just being a lovely time where our nervous systems were regulated with each other, and uh, no major traumas healed or anything of that sort. That wasn't the goal of it. It can be an incredibly amazing bonding experience, just even at low levels, not trying to work through anything.
Yeah, I recently wrote this book called Ecstasy for Couples. It ends
Yes.
up that there had never been a book written about that. And yet, that's how it originally got popular. And in Ecstasy for Couples, I actually have a chapter dedicated to people who want to use it on their own with their partner, not facilitated, and give a lot of information about that. Now, MDMA is great because you can use it just as a bonding thing. It can be used for fun,
Yeah.
but it can also be used very therapeutically for couples,
Yeah.
either on their own or facilitated. Uh, and I kind of guide people on how to get the greatest value from using it potentially on their own if they want to do that. It's as you said, it's a little bit of a truth serum. It's a little bit of open heartedness. It eliminates the fear. So couples often have a hard time talking about certain subjects, like the details of their sex life. That's not a conversation you easily have. On MDMA, it's like talking about the weather, you know?
Yeah.
And you can get information about what you each like or don't like real easily, which can help your love life tremendously, or what's in the way of a good love life, um, that just aren't going to come out in normal conversation, and often don't even come out in the first 2 years of therapy
Yeah.
because people are guarded.
There's so much in our society shame around all of that, yeah. So in the Ecstasy for Couples book, are you giving case studies? Are you giving philosophy? Like, how is it kind of laid out for, I know we have facilitators and practitioners listening to this podcast.
Well, from taking my course, my training, Jill, that I'm not big into philosophy. I'm big into practicality.
Yes.
So the book details things like contraindications and how to deal with side effects so you don't have bad side effects. But I deal with a lot of um, couple processes and exercises. Now, actually, some people have said it's a great book, even if you're not taking MDMA together, because it's really a couples book. Back in the 90s, I was on Oprah for a book I wrote called Communication Miracles for Couples, and she said it was the most helpful couples book ever written. That made my career for a while because it became a New York Times bestseller, and I started doing a lot of couples therapy. But couples therapy tends to be a long, slow slog without MDMA.
Okay.
With MDMA, it's kind of like a one and done type of thing.
Really?
Well, yeah, that's my experience. I do the MDMA session, I do the integration session a week later, and often that's all they need. Every now and then I might do, an hour session to fine tune things. But I'm an impatient person that likes results, and I find that couples therapy really takes a very long time. There's a lot of blame and shame and complaining and all that stuff to weed through.
Um,
And that stuff disappears in about 12 minutes on MDMA, so we can get right to the heart of what's wrong and how do we fix it. And people don't have the ego defenses that keep them from the learning at an accelerated rate. So I just find it much more satisfying, and my couples that do it find it a lot more satisfying as well. But the book is Ecstasy for Couples is very much like a practical guide how to help couples, and lots of simple techniques and exercises that would really help any couple, but more how to do that with MDMA, especially to accelerate things.
I think that's when I was reading the book, or more importantly, when I was going through the course, and you give people questions. I've gone through three coaching certifications, and only one coaching program gave questions. I actually had to go buy a couple of other books. I had a great program at Microsoft, so I understood the inherent, these are questions you can ask to kind of move things forward. You get very specific in the kinds of questions, and then even from their responses, kind of where to go. So I did find your program to be very practical versus I think it's a mistake to always say, well, what does the medicine say? I think with MDMA, there's a big
Mm.
opportunity to say the medicine is here and we can also go forward. So I think do you give the same kind of thing? Are there questions for couples?
A lot of questions, a lot of specific exercises, yeah, and people get to choose. As you know, there's a balance between letting the medicine bring up stuff, and then maybe the facilitator, one of the couple, bring up the questions, and that's a balance. But with practice, you kind of get a feel for that balance. You did mention that sometimes the medicine actually seems to have like an intelligence of its own, where it's bringing up the right stuff. I'll give you a personal example. I've been married 25 years, but twice in our relationship, we had kind of hit a wall, and the last one was 10 years ago, where my wife was mad at me all the time. for like,
And as the
how I,
woman, I say, what were you doing?
yeah, yeah. And I was wondering, what am I doing? And she'd say, you're walking through the house so loudly, or you shut the refrigerator door wrong or whatever. And it,
Clearly, clearly.
clearly, yeah. So neither of us really knew what was going on, but it was very unpleasant for about 3 months. So I actually hired the best therapist I know to live with us for 4 days.
Oh,
Because
okay.
the alternative was divorce.
Uh-huh.
And so after 3 days, he says, I have no clue what's going on because she's upset at you all the time and you're not doing anything wrong. So he said, I recommend that you take MDMA together. So we did. We had done that before. And we took MDMA together. And what came out was that her aunt had died 3.5 months earlier, who she was very close to, but she had not taken the time to visit her aunt. And she was incredibly upset at herself for having not visited her aunt. And she was taking it out on me. When that was discovered, she cried for an hour while I held her, and all her anger at me disappeared. And none of us had any clue that this was what was going on.
Yeah.
So,
Sometimes I don't know if family members sometimes realize that the emotion gets thrown onto a safe family member.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it really saved our marriage. And there was one other time where it also saved our marriage. And, love is grand, but divorce can be 100 grand.
Yeah, yeah. That's a nice phrase. Yeah. Yeah.
And you want to have the best technologies in this day and age to get back to a place of love and connection. We have more stressors than ever before. So we need things like MDMA to help us remember the love and the support that we want from our partners.
So when would a couple know that they are ready to do this kind of work?
Well, probably the hardest thing with MDMA therapy is getting. I do a lot of individual work, of course, with just one person. But when I do couples work, it's helpful if both people will take the MDMA. I do work with couples where only one person's taking the MDMA, but it is better if both of them, and that's the hardest step. Once people have done that, the therapy, the results are actually easy from there on. Um, Now, when is it the right time? When's it the right time to eat a delicious pizza? I say anytime. You know, um, you don't want to eat pizza every day, and I generally will not work with people more than 3 times a year.
Right.
But generally, I only have to work with a person or with a couple once. Um, the results are enough that I don't really have to see them again. Some couples I've worked with do a yearly clear out the cobwebs session and rebonding session. It's kind of like celebrating your anniversary.
Yep.
And stressors accumulate. And so some couples have decided, well, I just want to do it with once a year, and we will handle all our issues during that 5-hour session, and then we don't have to spend time arguing with each other.
Right. I mean, 90% of the reason why I still use medicine occasionally is literally clear out the cobwebs. There's some junk that
Mhm.
I need to restart. Need a restart. So I
Yeah.
think what I'm hearing is you're not going to take a couple that is on the verge of killing each other.
No, I will take those people.
Oh, really? And
Well,
are they willing?
that's probably half the people I see.
Tell me more about that. Really? I just assumed it was people who, oh, we're having a rough patch and we know we want to solve it. Like you have people who are like they're on the verge of calling the lawyer kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe not half, maybe a third of the couples I see are trying to figure out whether they're staying together or getting divorced.
Oh. So this is
And there's two ways that can go. I mean, first of all, people who are on the verge of divorce, they never say, we really understand each other very well. That's why we want a divorce. There's usually a very big lack of understanding of each other. And if MDMA does one thing ridiculously well, it's that it helps you understand your partner. kind of get into their reality in an
Yeah.
empathic way.
Okay.
Once that happens, and that always happens on MDMA, once that happens, most of the time couples do want to stay together, but sometimes they realize, oh, we're going in totally different directions. We don't belong together. And so I have had couples that see me for MDMA therapy, and they do end up getting divorced, but they do it with compassion and kindness rather than blaming, shaming, and complaining.
Right.
So I think of those sessions as well as a success. But in most cases, they see that they just really need more understanding, more communication skills, and solving some specific problems.
Wow. I had totally made a judgment there. So thank you for clarifying. I think probably it comes from the fact that my parents were just so horrendous to each other I think that's where that question came from. So
Yeah.
I came to your training already having experience, wanting to continue to deepen my knowledge base, things of that sort. Who who are you finding being drawn to your training program?
Well, first of all, people who have appreciated the value of MDMA in their own life, and they are generally in some kind of healing work or profession. It could be, a therapist, but probably half the people in the training were, you know, uh, in other healing type
Yeah,
work, coaches or
coaches or
other
just
things like that.
yeah, medicine folks.
And they like the idea of guiding other people in these sessions and knowing, there's a fair amount to know. As you know, there's probably 35 hours of videos, 200 pages of documents,
Yep.
etc.
Yep.
um, a lot of things to know in terms of marketing yourself in a way that doesn't get you into trouble.
Hmm.
uh, how to get the medicine, make sure it's safe, all kinds of stuff. There's a lot to it. And I feel good that I think this is really the only or the most practical training in that area.
It is.
There are academic institutions that have like 2-year programs, but they go into like the physiology of the brain and things like that. I say, well, this is how you market yourself. This is how you do it. Specifically, this is what goes on in hour one, hour two, hour three. Contraindications, all those things. So really, I think it's people who just have a deep appreciation of the medicine and would like to help other people with it. And I was really honored to guide 500 people in that in the last itinerary.
Yeah, I think people who come, this is my opinion. My opinion, and a dollar bill doesn't even get you a cup of coffee anymore. I think there's a huge difference in facilitation between some of the other classic psychedelics and MDMA, because you'll talk to facilitators from the other classics and they're like, let the medicine work, it's your inner voice, and they're much more, I'm going to use a observatory, they're much more passive. I find in my own therapy, when I facilitate people with MDMA, being engaged is a much more productive, and I almost want to say speedy. Like it just moves things along so much quicker for the client. So in my opinion, it's a different kind of working with medicine that unless you've worked with MDMA, you might not have that experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's well said. And people often ask me, well, how do people sit for 5 hours on Zoom? Well, for the people on MDMA, nobody has any problem whatsoever.
Yes.
I usually ask for a 5-minute break in the middle, but when you're in a riveting conversation, you can sit for a long time.
Oh, the client has no idea how long we've been sitting. Yeah, absolutely
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
No, no,
yeah.
you're aware of it. You're aware of it, but they aren't. They aren't. That's really interesting. All right, so Jonathan, what question have I not asked you? Well, I have 10 million questions, but not everybody in the audience wants to facilitate and things of that sort. So, what question have I not asked that kind of your average person hearing about this for the first or second time would need to know or would be interested in?
Well, if somebody has not taken MDMA, one thing that is important to know is that about half the MDMA in America is not pure. And therefore, if you hear of a bad MDMA trip, you know that wasn't MDMA as far as I'm concerned.
Yes.
Because out of the 650 I've held, nobody's had a bad experience. But there is a lot of impure MDMA
Mhm.
in America. So one of the things I managed to do in the course is make sure that people who didn't have access, they could get access to pure MDMA, because that's really important. Now, if you don't know, there are kits that you can get to test the purity. Dancesafe.org has a good kit. You can buy both a full kit from them or get for $1.99 a fentanyl strip. Now, fentanyl hasn't been a big problem with MDMA, but you don't want to mix any fentanyl with MDMA, of
Right.
course,
Of course.
and so testing it that way. But once you have the good medicine, I think the standard of a good set and setting, knowing your intention of whether you're doing it just by yourself or doing it with a person, and uh, giving yourself a gift. I think in this day and age, we need to take periodic breaks from our stressful lives to listen within or listen to our partner. And that this sacred medicine really, if you set the right intention and setting and the pure medicine, and including in the book, Ecstasy as Medicine and Ecstasy for Couples, I go into specific supplements you can take to make sure that you don't have the side effects that sometimes get people, feel weird the next day or something.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
find if people take those supplements, which are you can get at websites for $10, uh, that it makes it just a lot more enjoyable without any repercussions.
Yes, and I would second that. I think supplementation is really helps what's, the MDMA hangover. I've had folks that are like, "What are you talking about hangover?" And I'm like, "Well, that's because we took an appropriate therapeutic dose and you did all the supplements and all that other kind of stuff." I think I would reiterate for people that what you might read on Reddit about these crazy doses of what people go into parties, that's not the dosage for therapeutic use. And as long as you get screened and don't have any heart issues and things of that sort, obviously any sort of psychiatric background that could be of an issue, it's at the proper dosing with the supplements to help the kind of crash afterward. I think it's a really beautiful medicine for a relatively large amount of people.
Yeah, the one major contraindication for people is antidepressants.
Yes.
A lot of people are on antidepressants and they don't mix. Not that they're particularly dangerous, but they work on the same neural pathway, so they cancel each other out.
Yeah.
So you just don't feel it.
You've just wasted
So,
time.
right, right.
So I like the cadence of the once a year. Uh, I do think it's important, like what you just said, that you don't do it, like once a quarter maybe, because you really have to let the integration sit and kind of deal with the continuing perspective shifts.
Yeah, people have often worried, is MDMA addictive because it feels so good? It ends up it's not addictive for an interesting reason. The more you do it, the less you feel it.
Yes.
So if you do it, 4 times a month, by the fourth time, you're not feeling it. So it's kind of anti-addictive in that way.
Yeah, I would agree. Very much like some other psychedelics, the same way. You think like, oh, I'm just going to kind of binge for a month, and you're kind of like, oh no, there's really no point to this.
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so tell us where everybody can find you, Jonathan, because you've got a bunch of stuff and you got a bunch of different links. Obviously, they can find you if they Google you, but tell us more specifically where we can find you.
I have two websites devoted to MDMA. One is called xtcasmedicine.com. And then I have one called xtcforcouples.net. And at both of them, if you put in your email address, you get a list of 10 ways to make sure you avoid bad psychedelic trips. So
And then
they can contact me through there, and there's a lot of information there about how I work and how other people work, um, and I'm glad to help people in any way I can.
and then you also have an MDMA training link.
Yeah, the MDMA, so people can learn about the training, which is at mdmatraining.net. For listeners of your podcast, I can offer $200 off the training costs with the coupon code OFFSCENE for
Scene.
psychedelic
Off
scene,
scene. And we'll
OFFSCENE.
make sure we have that in the program notes. That's awesome. Okay. All right. Um, I could keep you talking for an awfully long time digging into the weeds, but I do think that we've given a beautiful overview of what is possible with this medicine for individuals and for couples. And as much as I laughed the first time you handed me the book and I'm like, Zoom, MDMA, what are you talking about? I really have to commend you because it can be incredibly appropriate for a whole lot of people. So thank you.
This makes it a lot more convenient, a lot less expensive, and evidently a lot better results too. So I'm really happy about that.
Awesome. Jonathan, thank you for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure, Jill. Thanks for having me.
So there you go, folks. I think it's always interesting to talk to different practitioners, and Jonathan definitely has a ton of experience. And I also like that he talks a lot about moderation. This is not about blasting people out with medicine or doing, multiple journeys, multiple months. He has a very grounded way of working with this medicine in couples, and I think it's a really interesting perspective to look at the future of how medicine might be delivered. And so with that said, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and liking. And if you want more psychedelic culture, head on over to psychedelicscene.com. We've got really cool stories about music, art, new books that are coming out. And if you like that content, consider buying Jason, our founder, a little cup of coffee, because he is up 24/7 keeping this content up to date and available for all of us. And so with that said, until next time, family, take care.